We are doing Extra Life again this year, where you can mash buttons, roll dice, play games, and help kids along the way. I hope you'll be a part of that with us. Stick around after the video for more information. Well, my editing skills are crap. Oh wait, did I turn the volume thing? Yeah, I think. Okay, my editing skills are crap. But can the same thing be said about Flatliners, the 2017 version of Flatliners? Stick around and find out. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your... Hey, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions, here with my uncut review of Flatliners. That intro business will make a little more sense after you see the movie. These are not my notes. Where are my notes? Okay, the synopsis for the 2017 remake of Flatliners on IMDb reads, 5 medical students obsessed with what lies beyond the confines of life embark on a daring experiment. By stopping their hearts for short periods, each triggers a near-death experience, giving them a first-hand account of the afterlife. I'll come back to that phrasing in a little bit. And then I would add, but when they begin experiencing supernatural horrors after their flatline experiences, they find themselves in a race to figure out how to escape them before they flatline for good. Alright, now I don't remember much of the original Flatliners movie. I did see it many, many moons ago. This feels like a standard horror movie where, you know, people tamper with unknown forces and they open a door to the dark side of the supernatural world, you know. And it also has some, not a ton, not as bad as it could be, but it also has some shallow, what I would call CW sexiness, where these young 20-somethings are just getting in these very shallow relationships that are all about getting hot and heavy and having great abs and stuff. It felt like cheap pandering to me rather than something that said much about the characters, although arguably, you know, you could say that it played up their reckless, foolish nature as young 20-somethings, and, you know, the fact that they just weren't taking things seriously enough. They were just being thoughtless in the way that they were approaching life and the circumstances that they're in. So I guess so, but to me, you could have said that in much shorter terms. I think they just wanted to kind of show a little bit of as much skin as they could show in a PG-13 movie in a few scenes. So I did stay interested in the story for most of the movie, but there was a lull where I was just kind of like checking predictable plot boxes, like, okay, so she had this thing happen, so now he's going to have a bad experience. Okay, now we got to get to her. She's going to have her bad experience and stuff, you know. So it was a little bit by the numbers for a little while in there. I think the cast did a fine job. They did a good job of crying or looking scared, which are kind of key things you have to be good at doing. At least the female actors did. That the guys weren't called upon to do that as much, and, you know, maybe that was a good thing. I don't know. Beyond that, you know, the whole being scared and crying thing, there wasn't anything that stood out to me about their performances, or that, you know, none of them were doing things that like maybe a character actor would do to bring unusual layers and subtext and quirkiness or anything like that to their characters. Just very standard, you know, 20-somethings, you know. And each of the characters did have some kind of motivation that I could, you know, probably name to you if I sat and thought about it for a second. But between the writing not going deeper on characterization and the solid yet what I would say is standard acting, the performances didn't create any characters that were unique or interesting enough for me to remember or really care about them. Let's see, briefly about the visuals. The visuals were fine, but I would have liked to have had them go even further in the creativity of the near-death experience sequences, maybe a little just more striking and stark or disturbing or just weird, you know, something weird and like kind of almost Lovecraftian about the near-death experiences would have been kind of cool. Like, what the crap is happening? This is too weird for me, you know. I think it would have been cool if they would have gone further in that direction. I mean, because they're definitely taking the idea of near-death experiences and what people have documented about them and really playing up some very specific things that are not really the most common factors, the most common documented things about near-death experiences, and just kind of having fun in a horror movie setting with that concept. I want to spend probably most of my time talking about the themes of this movie. I always try to ask myself in any entertainment I'm engaging with, okay, is there anything of worthwhile, or philosophical, moral, spiritual, you know, content that might stimulate worthwhile thought or conversation. And I think that's almost definitely the case with this one. The first one that I would want to talk about that I think is intended by the movie to be a theme is forgiveness. It seems like a very important theme, especially near the end. I'm going to give what might be like spoilers by implication, not direct spoilers, I don't think, but maybe maybe just some light, like by implied spoilers. I don't know what that means, but anyway. The characters are all haunted by manifestations of their own guilt, which they kind of come around to realizing at some point. And to escape these horrors, they discover that they have to take responsibility for these things that they've done wrong in the past, either by fixing what they've done wrong, receiving forgiveness from the person that they've wronged, or if the one they've wronged is dead, then forgiving themselves. And this is another one of those almost like follow your heart, do what feels right, these kind of like pop spiritual phrases that find their way into Hollywood movie and TV scripts that I'm just like, that doesn't make sense to me. That sounds like really bad or illogical advice. So forgiving themselves has never made sense to me, because if you wrong someone else and then they die, you can't receive their forgiveness. So I can see the frustration of, well, what do you do with that? What do you do with that? Because they're not alive, they can't express forgiveness to you. There's no hope for getting forgiveness from them. So I guess you just gotta forgive yourself and just get over that feeling of guilt by forgiving yourself. But how can you forgive yourself when you aren't the one that you wronged? So I think forgiving yourself is another one of these pop spiritual ideas that, when actually examined, really doesn't make sense. Now, biblically speaking, when we sin against someone else, we are first and foremost sinning against God. David, when he was repenting of what he had done to Bathsheba and orchestrating the murder of Bathsheba's husband and all that stuff, in his prayer to God, he said, he was so bold as to say, against you and you only have I sinned, as if to say, by comparison, I haven't sinned against anybody else. He had a really strong sense of this awareness. Now, he was wronging other people, but I think that there was that sense of, what's the hyperbole in saying that against you, by comparison, you are the only one that really matters right now that I've sinned against, that I got to deal with this. So we're first and foremost sinning against God, even when we sin against somebody else. It was his intention to create beings who reflect who he is, and he's given them intrinsic value. Every human being is to be deeply loved and highly respected. We are rejecting God's good and beautiful intent and purpose for creation when we sin against others. And so we primarily need forgiveness from him, even if that person refuses to forgive us or has died, and so we can't get forgiveness from them in this life. We primarily need forgiveness from God. He loves and values people like far more than we can even fathom. And so, and he's also unfailingly just and will not let evil go unchecked when he sees one of these creatures that he loves deeply being wronged. So when we wrong people, God's perfect justice comes into play, and there needs to be punishment. Otherwise, he wouldn't be a just God. He would just be this guy that's like, I'll just shrug. People are getting treated horribly. What can I do? That would not be, we would not say God is just if that was his attitude. Now, we can't pay for the sins of yesterday by being perfectly good or extra good today, because we're already obligated to be perfectly good and extra good, and whatever we think we can do today, we're already obligated to do that. We need someone with like overflowing goodness to spare that can pay our debt to God. And God knows that, so he provides that payment himself through Jesus Christ, and will credit Christ's perfect and infinitely good life to our account if we accept that offer. Now, he's not going to force that down our throats, but if we reject his offer to rescue us from the mess that we've made, then we will be subject to his fair judgment and justice, and will be quarantined away from his presence after this life, and away from all who spend eternity with him. Now, that may be a distasteful pill to swallow. I think it commonly is among those who are not believers, and maybe some believers even feel like, oh man, I'm struggling with that, I don't like how that feels, and there's something that, and I think those things are worth reasoning through and thinking through, I'm not going to go follow that rabbit trail right now, but I do think that feeling leads many to look for hope in the phenomenon of near-death experiences, and they want to base their ideas of the afterlife on those, or find confirmation of what they already want to believe in the world of near-death experience accounts. And near-death experience accounts are certainly a source of inspiration for this movie. Near-death experiences, or NDEs as they're called by people who maybe spend more time looking into them, have been of increasing interest to people and are often pointed to as evidence that some of what the Bible teaches is false, or only true in a personal, relativistic sense, not universally and objectively true for everyone. Since there are both similarities and differences among NDE accounts, people often want to cling to those similarities as a reason to hope in a positive afterlife of some kind, and then use the differences to kind of do away with any objective, exclusive claims by one particular religion or worldview. Because, one person who's had a near-death experience who comes from a Hindu background, then they're going to see Shiva or one of the many gods of Hinduism, and someone who has more of a Christian background or a Catholic background, maybe they'll see they'll see Jesus or something like that in their near-death experience, and there's all kinds of reasons to really kind of call either of those kinds of experiences into question. The problem with near-death experiences is that they're just that. They are near-death experiences. I mean, at best, we can draw from them some information about the very earliest parts of the death experience, but not the long-term experiences of people after death. That's like, me going to my movie today and watching the trailers and leaving and telling people what the rest of the movie is going to be. Yeah, the movie, it was going to be, I saw the first part of it. Turns out that when you go see movies, you sit and you watch like 2 to 3 hours of commercials for a bunch of movies. And someone would, rightly, who was in the know, say, no, that just comes at the very beginning. That's not like what the actual movie, the content of the movie experience is when you go see a movie at the theater, So I think we got to be careful making these broad claims about what's going on in the afterlife when we really don't understand what that is. Is that just a transitional period from life to death where our minds, even in their non-physical sense, are still like transitioning, and they're not capable of correctly and accurately perceiving reality as it is? There's just so much that we don't know, and we don't have any reason to believe that the collected post-life experience claims of any one NDE account are authoritative and represent objective reality. So based on cumulative NDE accounts, we either have to conclude that they are unpredictably very hit or miss in their accurate representation of early post-life experiences, or we have to embrace relativism, either universally or only in spiritual matters, which is ultimately self-defeating and nonsensical either way. What would be better is if someone came forward who claims the unique knowledge and authority to inform us of the nature of the supernatural and life after death, and who substantiates their claims to this unique knowledge and authority through unique supernatural acts that nobody else can do. Unsurprisingly, I think this is why Jesus makes a far more reliable authority on supernatural and post-life topics than the cumulative data collected from NDE accounts. Now, the downside is that Jesus not only claims unique knowledge and authority over supernatural topics, he claims unique authority over us, over our lives. And so a genuine investigation into life after death through examining the resurrection of Jesus requires a willingness to be ready to accept him as an authority over our lives if the case for his resurrection is genuinely convincing based on the evidence. And that, I think, is a problem for many who turn to NDEs as like their primary source for understanding life after death. Giving disproportionate weight to NDE accounts and downplaying the historical evidence of the resurrection of Jesus is a way to try and hold on to some hope for a positive afterlife experience without feeling obligated to be under any ultimate external authority in this life right now. So after a movie like this, I think an easy segue into meaningful conversation or personal reflection would be, what do you think of near-death experiences? Or as I think to myself, what do I think of this phenomenon of near-death experiences? With the potential follow-up question of, what do you think of the bodily resurrection of Jesus? Or I can think to myself, well, what do I think about the bodily resurrection of Jesus? Even as a believer, there's things that I am still pondering and wondering about the specifics of the bodily resurrection resurrection of Jesus. For some great resources on the historical evidence for the bodily resurrection of Jesus, I recommend visiting reasonablefaith.org. Again, that's reasonablefaith.org, where Dr. William Lane Craig shares his life's work of defending the historical reliability of the resurrection accounts, as well as he presents multiple logical reasons for accepting the truth claims of the Bible. Now, I have no idea what your tastes in movies are, but if I were a time traveler, I would go back in time and say, hey, Peter, skip this one unless you know someone for whom it might open the door to a good, worthwhile conversation. Aside from that, it doesn't do enough new things to make it stand out from the original, which was much more daring and unique, in your opinion, when it came out in 1990. It's rated PG-13 for violence and terror, sexual content, language, thematic material, and some drug references. All right, those are my thoughts. I'd love to get yours in the comments below. Please consider supporting this channel by becoming a Spirit Blade Insider, which grants you exclusive monthly behind-the-scenes content. For more info, you can visit our About page at spiritblade.com, where you can also get our weekly podcast and our audio dramas. And then after that, I hope you'll join us over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. Once again this year, Christian Geek Central is participating in Extra Life. This is a charity that raises funds for the Children's Miracle Network of Hospitals, which provides free medical care to children whose families could otherwise not afford it. And this is very often for critical, life-saving treatment. Joining our team only requires a willingness to ask your family and friends to consider donating toward your fundraising efforts. Participants also usually do something fun and game-related to draw attention to their fundraising efforts, like a special game night at your home or your church, or like me, you could do a crazy 24-hour video gaming marathon. Now, I'm theming it around video games, but really this event can be themed around any kind of gaming, which includes both video games and tabletop games of any kind. What you do to raise funds is entirely up to you, but I would love for you to consider joining the Christian Geek Central Extra Life team. As team leader, I'll be there to help answer your questions, provide some helpful tips if I can, and just in general be your fundraising cheerleader and try to draw attention myself to your fundraising efforts. You can get more information about the event as a whole at extra-life.org, and if you choose to sign up there, be sure to select Christian Geek Central as your team so I can get in touch with you and then just help in whatever way I can. Fundraising can begin at any time, but our main push is going to be through the month of October leading up to November 4th. That's the annual Extra Life Game Day, when I'll be streaming my 24-hour video gaming marathon live and trying to stay awake without throwing up like I almost did last year. More details on my live stream as we get closer to it. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.